Hi, I'm Prathap Dendi. I'm the general manager for emerging technologies and business IQ at a company called AppDynamics, which is a San Francisco-based company, now part of Cisco.
Welcome to the African Tech Roundup.
Thanks for the warm welcome, and looking forward to chatting with you.
So, Prathap, you hail from the south of India. India, of course, being a developing nation. We have in common the fact that we both come from developing parts of the world. Please give me a sense of what, as people from that part of the world, we ought to be most excited about in terms of the trend towards IoT. And, on the flip side of that, what we should have genuine concerns about in terms of perhaps some of the unsavory outcomes that might result as this trend is adopted.
No, it's great. I happened to graduate around the time that internet was just getting born. There were no things at that time. Now clearly Internet of Things, and just back in that time, growing up as a kid in developing country, your ticket to prosperity is really around finding a job that's very innovative and rewarding. And at that time, there were only 2 or 3 lines of career. You either become an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer. But now, not just IoT, but in general, for the generations that are growing up, there's a lot more opportunity. And I think some of that opportunity undoubtedly is sparked by broad availability of technology, where you as an individual, without even getting a job, you can innovate. Back in my generation, when I was coming out of school, the first thing and the most important thing to do was actually to find a job that's very well defined and probably limited to few lines of business. And I think what Internet of Things personifies is really how democratized the world has become, in terms of if you have an innovative idea that could then be developed into either a business or the most fantastic ability for you to innovate on top of it and make a good career. And IoT particularly, because it's really broad, even for communities, developing communities, where you have a lot of natural resources, where you have a lot of access to cheap human resources. The idea of using that to innovate very quickly on broadly and generically available platforms such as the IoT is a big gift, and that's what I'm excited about.
And so, again, that's the cotton candy, which we love, but it often is laced with unintended or unintentionally harmful outcomes. Give us a sense of what you are personally worried about, or at least cognizant of, in terms of some of the ill effects that we might experience in the developing world as this trend comes online.
It's fantastic. I think it's a really good question. I tend to be very optimistic about these trends, and there's a lot of goodness about every new technology-driven trend. The usual downsides there are, we're also seen as a very large demographic, in developing nations. We're also a very rich target, for monetization. And one of the things that we have to watch out for is really privacy and the data around our lifestyles. Because this day and age, what IoT allows is a lot of sensors at its economy of scale. It's not that expensive anymore to have real-time data coming from our communities. And to the extent that's used to better and improve our lives, that's great. And those are the common use cases that you hear about in terms of innovation around IoT. And the downsides is really around security and creating that fine line between privacy. It's very, very easy to come up with a very cool app these days, but the difference between a cool app and a creepy app is not that much, and that's what we have to be watchful for, and how do we protect our privacy and our community's privacy around it, and not be oversaturated with commercialization of it.
So I heard you speak on a panel earlier, and you shared an interesting use case for the Internet of Things in your home village. I'm going to ask you to share it now and then use that as a springboard for explaining how, in a similar context anywhere else in the developing world, there's a potential for disenfranchisement in terms of, basically impoverished communities not quite coming to terms with the implications of what happens when they give up their data, and really how valuable it is and how careful they ought to be when it comes to giving it up, and indeed to granting permissions in terms of how it's used. And also, it was interesting to me that even as an Internet of Things solution is rolled out in a place like your village, it's not thought of in that context at all. Speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. I come from Andhra Pradesh, which is a southern Indian state.
Shout out.
There you go. And it's blessed with a lot of natural resources. The example that I was giving earlier is leveraging a IoT technology whereby you capture the abundance of sunlight you have, because we're so close to the equator, we get a lot of sunlight. And how do you convert that into something that's very measurable? Right? This is your contribution of the sunlight capture, and that went into a repository. And then how do you barter that for something that you don't produce or has less availability? And that's where I think leadership, the local administration, leadership and policy makes a big difference. We're lucky to have a leader who is not only tech savvy, he's a technocrat himself, but he has made sure that such infrastructure exists for the commonest of the common people, and they don't have to go and read IoT for dummies to be able to capture that solar power and exchange that collection for something that's groceries or fuel. And they made it very simple with the help of a policy that's administered locally in that village, so that it's 100% visible to everybody. And the transparency of that kind of capture is also very valuable, because you don't need to teach people if you can show the value, right? So my neighborhood, the local villagers waking up and looking at how much energy did they actually collect through their solar panel roof. It's accessible through the internet, the least common denominator for them, through a mobile app or a browser. Every day they check on it. They're very proud of it, and they also track where their project is in terms of maturity. So that's a perfect example of where, when you have a demographic that is very ready for those enablers, the technology could actually become very invisible. You don't really need to have a course in the technology to the extent it's already giving you value. And I think it's a combination of the people's interest, but also importantly the policy and leadership around it.
So this is a perfect example of a win-win situation where, there's obvious, value in terms of the people participating or enabling or allowing this technology to harvest data and benefit commercially, etc. I think, speak to some of the cynics who are concerned that many of the commercial interests that drive big business to pursue this trend, many of their motives aren't necessarily geared towards a win-win situation for the average villager in your village or the average farmer in my country.
That's true, and I think that's where I think the emphasis on keeping it transparent, because we live in a world where all of this data is being captured now through a policy, making that data visible real time. Is a big change, a big transformation there, because now people know that's the demand for it. Right? They actually want to see it at a real-time basis,
and they start to understand the value of their data in the context of commercialism.
Absolutely, and I think that is the role that the local policy plays as well. And I visited China last year, and they've made a lot of strides in there, because if you look at it, those developing nations, their resources and human resources is their wealth, right? And natural resources around them is their wealth. 100 years ago, it's ironic, we were sitting in the tobacco docks, a relic of colonialism past. But now, back then that visibility and transparency didn't exist, right? So
hang on a moment, man. That Zimbabwe to this day continues to be a major tobacco producer, and I was struck walking through here that bales and bales of that stuff from my country easily came through here,
sitting in it, and this is the stockpile. This used to be their stock rooms, and we're comfortably, cozily sitting here. But I think what lacked at that time is really what you mentioned. I think intelligence was always there in humans. What we didn't have is the information and real-time information of how it's being used and who's benefiting from it. Is it being proportional? Is it being fair? I think that's changing, and that's changing, I think, much more rapidly than we think it is, because the commercial interest will always stay, and I think that's not a bad thing. But coupling coupling it with the right policy and giving the visibility to the end user and letting them choose, I think is massively important. And we're fortunate to live in that world. And our young ones, wherever they're growing up, they're lucky to be living in that area because they wake up and demand that. So I'm quite optimistic about the role IoT and whatever other technology comes in next is going to play as part of the mainstream for developing nations.
I'm actually quite hopeful that some of our policymakers on the continent are listening to this conversation because I personally feel like they're giving free passes to the Facebooks and the Googles of this world without close introspection or at least inspection into some of the issues we're discussing here. And not to say, we should turn them into enemies or deal with them with suspicion. I just do think there's a smart way to deal with it. That's it. That's just me reflecting. I just want to wind down by, you giving us a sense of your company specifically and where in the IoT value chain you feature and why Cisco would have acquired the business.
Just, AppDynamics is about 9 years old. It's still a very young company, and it was born around the time of internet becoming commercially very viable. And the founders had this insight that, hey, look, if Google can index every web page in the world, what if we index and have really good insight into the apps and every software line that's written in the world. And that is a very simple premise that we started delivering on. And we think it's still very early. We've done phenomenal business. We're one of the fastest growing companies in history, software companies. Very excited to be part of Cisco. And what AppDynamics does continues to be really the focus around application insights. What we call monitoring, and how we can leverage what we see in real time in the application behavior, so that we can share that with the users and the businesses, so that they can create a fantastic end-to-end experience for the end user. And that's what I was mentioning earlier in the panel. I think we have so much insight into the data right now in a runtime, and apps are connecting everything. So we are thrilled to be part of Cisco, and we're looking forward to a future where all of this gets used around the world.
It must be quite an interesting time to be in a business like yours, given how I'm guessing here, but AI must be disrupting the role of we would have expected the average data analyst to play in times past. So speak to how you're part of a disruptive trend and how you surf the trend of disruption within the context of, say, technologies that are influencing your particular business and obviously the human resource relationships that you have to manage within it.
No, that's a great question, Andile. So if you look at the amount of data we collect, runtime, real-time data, what it really does today, and we have a lot of customers that talk about this. We had a customer here in London a few weeks ago that came to a stage and said, before AppDynamics, we were kind of paramedics, right? So when something went down, an app misbehaving or a website not loading, we used to run after it and then try to fix it. Now with technologies like AppDynamics, they feel that they are brain surgeons, so they can actually get to the problem really, really quick without having to cause any delays in the surrounding tissue, but just really focusing on what the problem is and where the problem comes from. And as a result of what it does to an average professional in an IT role or even a CIO is that you're being very proactive rather than reactive. So it has a lot to do with the quality of your work day, right? So you're sitting on real-time insights, and you can catch as it happens, and you could stay ahead of it and inform your business of good trends and the bad trends. That way, you're not losing your midnight sleep chasing down what happened, where it happened, and that's really what's changed now. If you're coming to work, instead of you having to spend time on what went wrong, it's really the machine learning algorithms on AppDynamics Cloud that look through the data and give you very specific actionable insight saying, look, you don't have to call 10 people. We know exactly what the offending line of code or the database call or the network delay is, and this is it. This is, we can pinpoint that with such precision that you can go action. You can do something on it, and you're back to your coffee, and you can focus on more productive things, which is what human evolution is about, right? So you want to spend on things that you want to spend on, rather than working on very mundane things.
I was going to ask a cheeky question: is it making us smarter or dumber?
I think it's actually a really good question. I think about it all the time. It's making us smarter by all means, because it's giving you very relevant data. It's taking the clutter away. What machine learning and AI does today is really, and that's what the machines are so good at, and humans, are matchless in terms of the speed of computing. But our ability is really the contextual information and then how quickly humans are good. So AI and ML are really tools that improve our life. I think we've always imagined this to be a robotic form in our sci-fi movies, but quickly what we realize is it's really data that's getting churned up in the cloud or massive data centers, so that you can have a much better conversation with someone like me, or go grab a nice cup of coffee. So that's really where it is. It's quality of life.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for spending time with us on the African Tech Roundup, man.
Thank you.
Cheers.